So I'm just going to start off by asking, what's your experience been like reporting on non-league this year with the constantly changing circumstances?
Yeah, this year more than ever before. Really, it's been ever moving and ever changing. It's been really difficult for everyone involved in non-league, actually, for those that have been running, leagues, and for the FA, and for volunteers and secretaries and chairmen that have been running clubs as well. Reporting on it has been tricky because there's so many different authorities involved in running the game. Everything from government rules that are changing to government departments, to DCMS, to the FA, to the National League, to different leagues and clubs, and then local authorities on top of that, local councils. Everybody has their say. Everyone has their own set of rules and guidelines at the moment, and it isn't always clear what the truth is, or what clubs need to follow and what they need to do. So, as journalists staying across that, trying to make sense of that, and trying to make sense of quite lengthy documents sometimes in terms of the rules that clubs have to follow, whilst they're lengthy, quite often they're quite vague as well. Trying to make sense of that, summarising that, hasn't always been easy. But it's been interesting. I mean, it's not a year that anyone will want to repeat, but it has been interesting in terms of following it, the narrative of it, and it's been almost impossible riddle to solve from March last year when leagues stopped. What happens deciding those leagues, how clubs move forward, to the restart of non-league, and then the stopping again now in November, and the possible restart, next month, although we still don't really know much certainty over whether it can restart. It's been interesting, but yeah, not one I don't think any of us really want to repeat.
And when the season was made null and void back in March for all teams below the National League, what were your thoughts on this?
I think personally my frustration is the inconsistency over it. So what we love about non-league, what we love about English football is it's all joined up. It's all one ladder. If you win enough games, you can get promoted all the way from the bottom all the way up to the Premier League. You've got facilities and other bits, but in theory you can do that. So it's all supposed to be joined up. And actually, if we look back at the decisions that were made over the summer, the Premier League and the Championship decided they were eventually going to find a way to finish the season. League One, League Two, and the National Leagues decided they were going to decide on points per game. We're going to hold playoffs to decide promotion. And everything below that was made null and void. So you effectively got three different solutions for different sets of leagues within the English football pyramid. And I think that felt quite frustrating, the inconsistency of it. I think if all of English football was made null and void, I think clubs could perhaps get their head around that decision, or clubs that wanted promotion could get their head around that decision. But as it was, there were different solutions for different leagues, and in reality, there's not a lot of difference between clubs at step 3 and that league being made null and void, and clubs at step 2 that was decided on points per game, or if you go higher up the pyramid, not that much difference between the top of League One and the bottom of the Championship in terms of the clubs that are playing at that level. But it was different decisions. I think the inconsistency is quite frustrating.
Well, exactly, and especially because most of the clubs played, 3/4 of their season. A lot were even denied promotion. It seemed odd at the time, but you'd understand some of the anger, couldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. Clubs that had already mathematically secured promotion, it seems like Jersey Bulls or Vauxhall Motors that had gone the whole season unbeaten and had already mathematically celebrated the fact that they'd been promoted. To lose that, you can totally feel for those clubs, and it wouldn't have happened in the Premier League. It was almost inconceivable that Liverpool weren't going to be either given the opportunity to win the title or weren't going to give them the title on points per game. If we look at where they were. And certainly, have they celebrated promotion? Have they celebrated the title in the Premier League? Have they already mathematically sealed the title before when it's that March lockdown? No one was going to take that away from them. That wasn't going to be made null and void, was it? So the fact that was able to happen lower down the pyramid in step 6 and non-league, because it's a less high-profile league, feels wrong to me. Clearly there were clubs that were quietly quite happy about the season being made null and void. Clubs at the bottom of their leagues. But you can certainly understand the frustration of teams that were going for promotion, going for titles, and that's taken away from them.
And when non-league football was starting to return in September, and there were clubs below step 3 were allowed small numbers of fans back in, but the National League weren't. Do you think the National League should have been made a special case and had small numbers in?
I think it's always been tricky. We're living in this weird world where we've got this label of elite sport and non-elite sport, and in reality, it's a bit of an arbitrary, bit of a random label that has just been stuck on, sport at the moment to try and make sense of guidelines. in reality, there's no difference really between the bigger clubs in the third tier of non-league and the smaller clubs in the second tier of non-league. There's no difference in safety. And actually, there's an argument for the higher up the pyramid you go, the safer fans will be in grounds, because they've got more full-time officials, they've got more money to spend on stewarding, they've got bigger facilities. So in theory, 600 fans at, say, Notts County, a lot safer than 600 fans in a step 3 ground in the Southern Premier League, because it's a big facility. It almost became a little bit of an anomaly, actually, fans at that level of football, and it's something now that we're seeing now a question mark over it as the government are reintroducing guidelines and are looking again at clarifying what happens in this new tier 3 lockdown. It actually looks like the rules for elite sport and for National League saying that you're not allowed fans if you're in tier 3 looks like that's going to apply now to the rest of non-league as well. It looks like there's some element of bringing it all together now that wasn't the case over the summer. But in a long way of answering what was quite a short question from you, it felt wrong that fans weren't allowed. The National League when they were allowed lower down the pyramid, and it's just this sort of arbitrary label of elite sport and non-elite sport that prevented them to, because clubs in the National League North and South were labelled the same as the Premier League, and clearly they're very different in reality.
Yeah, so my next question was actually going to talk about tier 3, because obviously it only came in yesterday and it's already sort of causing a bit of issue, because a lot of sides in tier 3 are not going to be able to have teams play. They have to play their games behind closed doors. And how damaging will this be to clubs, especially below the National League?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we don't totally know where we are. But where we think we are is that clubs that are playing in that tier 3 area, and that's almost half the country, almost half of the non-league clubs, are not going to have fans at home games. And clubhouses, which are a big earner for non-league football, clubhouses and selling beer and burger and drinks and refreshments, it feels like no clubs are basically going to be able to do any of that in tier 2 or tier 3 areas. So that's basically almost the whole of England at the moment, apart from Cornwall and the Isle of Wight and the Isle of Man. So without that, financially, non-league is in a real mess. It seems at the moment probably more likely than not that several leagues are going to not restart at the start of December, because without fans at games in tier 3 and without being able to sell refreshments to almost any fans in any grounds, financially non-league isn't really sustainable, and clubs aren't going to want to restart under those conditions. I think the FA will probably sort of force the continuation and the restart of the FA Trophy and the FA Marsden Cups and competitions like that, but I think some leagues, especially leagues in the north, they're not going to start something under these conditions. And unless the government looks again at those tiers in a couple of weeks or in January, I think it throws a huge doubt over whether seasons are going to finish properly. I think some leagues will finish. You look at the South West Peninsula League, which covers Devon and Cornwall. They can probably get away with it at the moment under the restrictions. But North West Counties League, probably not. 39 of their 40 teams are in tier 3. It's just not going to work. Not sustainable. So what that means for the pyramid, what that means for the season, who knows? I think the FA this season are quite keen on a point per game solution if they can't finish seasons, ironically. Maybe it goes down that route, but there's still clubs that haven't played a game yet in the North West Counties. Clubs at Isle of Man, some have played 3 or 4, but we're nowhere near being able to get a points per game solution to those leagues because they've barely started. It's a real mess at the moment.
Yeah, and do you think the FA has actually offered enough support to sides this year?
Financially, it's difficult because the FA doesn't have a huge amount of money to throw at non-league football. It's a not-for-profit organisation. So whilst you can look at, maybe they put more investment in the higher tiers and less in grassroots and non-league, actually there isn't a huge amount of money around for them to do that. I think in terms of clarity and in terms of information and in terms of guidance, there's probably been times where maybe that guidance and that clarity hasn't been there at times when clubs needed it. I think the rules over crowds and fans and things like that when we first came back to playing football, the FA wasn't particularly good at clarifying what could happen if, say, a club in step 3 hosted a football league club in a friendly because they have fans because they're not fans. They didn't make a decision on things like that early enough, in my opinion. But generally, it's been really difficult actually. If you're involved in the FA, you think 2019 looked like, the jobs and what you had to do compared to 2020. I don't envy their position at the moment, having to constantly change and adapt guidance and work out what they do for sort of 1 week to the next. It must be a massive headache, to be fair to them. You know, trying to look after disability sport, indoor sport, futsal, you know, women's game, girls' game, walking football, as well as non-league and, you know, higher up that we look at more often. There's a huge amount that they've got to do, actually. I don't really envy what the FA have to do. Financially, maybe there's a tiny bit more support that could be needed, but I don't think there's actually a huge amount more they can do, to be honest.
Let's say, on to my final question. So, do you think the footballing world has paid enough concern to the survival of non-league clubs this year?
No, I don't think it has. I think it's continued to sort of fly under the radar a little bit. And my worry is it's going to get lost in the celebrations of next week and the week after, fans coming back to stadiums. You know, the Football League, the National League and the Premier League are going to be rightly excited about fans returning. And it feels like them taking a step forward, whilst in reality, we could be seeing the beginning of the end for quite a lot of non-league teams in the coming weeks and months, because some leagues are going to try and restart, I'd imagine, and there are going to be some clubs within that are in this tier 3 or are in tier 2 and relying on the money from either gate receipts or from clubhouses and selling food and drink that are going to really, really struggle in the next few weeks. I think we genuinely, seriously could start to lose non-league clubs because they've had a tiny bit of revenue over the first couple of months of the season. That's been stopped. It looks like it's going to be stopped going forward for quite a long period of time. There's some financial support available from this government funding, the DCMS, the 300 million across all sports. Some of that's going to trickle down to non-league, but it sounds like very little of that is actually going to be in grants. Most of that's going to be in loans, and non-league clubs are not in a position to be paying back the loans over the next couple of years. So, yeah, I think non-league is in a really perilous position, and I don't really think much attention has been paid from the sort of bigger clubs and probably those in the media as well and those in authority. I think now we're coming into a point where they are really at risk of going under in this current system, and I hope that people take notice of that, but I worry that they won't.